Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
When you stand on the sidewalk and you just look up at a towering modern skyscraper, there is this immense expectation of permanence, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
You see the glass reflecting the clouds, and you see these clean, pristine, perfectly engineered lines, and you just think to yourself, we built that. It is solid, it has conquered gravity, and it is entirely separate from the messiness of the dirt below.
It really does feel that way. It feels like a monument to, I don't know, pure detached ambition, like it's almost floating.
Exactly. But then you walk inside, you step into the polished elevator, and you take it all the way down into the sub-basement.
Right, where the real work happens.
Exactly. The
Yeah.
doors open, and suddenly the whole illusion is gone. You see these massive, brutal concrete pylons driven deep into the bedrock. You smell the diesel exhaust, and you hear the aggressive, violent hum of enormous, energy-hungry generators. And in that moment, the reality really hits you.
Yeah, you realize that this beautiful, pristine skyscraper is entirely, inextricably dependent on the muddy, chaotic, vibrating physical earth beneath it. I mean, it cannot exist without the dirt, and it certainly cannot function without consuming a massive amount of physical resources.
And that is exactly where we are sitting today. So welcome to today's deep dive. If you are joining us, you are likely the kind of person who wants to understand the grand architecture of our world, without getting lost in the relentless noise of the 24-hour news cycle.
Yeah, you want the big picture.
Right. You want the big picture, but you also want to know exactly how those basement generators are running. And looking at the stack of global reporting on our table today, we are looking at a landscape that is incredibly murky.
I mean, the word murky might be an understatement at this point.
Mhm.
The volume of global events occurring simultaneously right now is it's chaotic.
Yeah, it really is.
But that is the work we do here. Because if we step back and look at the underlying mechanics, there are distinct, sometimes beautiful, and sometimes terrifying patterns connecting our technological leaps directly to environmental, economic, and political consequences.
Nothing is happening in a vacuum.
Exactly. Everything is tethered together.
Huh. I will tell you, I needed a concerning amount of coffee this morning just to comprehend the sheer timeline of the events we are covering. My brain was misfiring before I even started reading the sources today.
Which is deeply ironic, considering coffee is just another highly fragile global agricultural supply chain.
Oh man, don't say that.
I mean, it's true. If the shipping lanes go down or the climate shifts in the equatorial belt, your comprehension of the daily news goes down right along with it.
Okay, well that's a terrifying thought to start the day with. But let's actually start by looking up. Long before we dig into the heavy earthly matters, I think we need to examine humanity's highest aspirations.
Right into space.
Right. Because right now, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, is officially making history. Like, as we speak, the Artemis II mission has passed the halfway point to the moon.
It's incredible.
It is. This means they are breaking humanity's all-time distance record for a crewed spacecraft.
It is just a staggering logistical and scientific achievement. I mean, we have a crew consisting of NASA astronauts Reed Wiseman, Christina Koch, and Victor Glover, and they're flying alongside Canadian Space Agency astronaut Jeremy Hansen.
Right.
And they're executing the first crewed lunar flyby since the Apollo era.
And the visuals coming back from the Orion capsule are just breathtaking. Commander Wiseman captured this spectacular image of Earth through the window, and seeing our planet hanging in the absolute blackness of space, it really highlights the fragility of it all.
Yeah, the pale blue dot effect.
Exactly. And they aren't just up there taking photographs, right? For the first time, NASA has introduced dedicated science officers into mission control. We have Kelsey Young, who's the lunar science lead, alongside Trevor Graff and Angela Garcia.
Which, by the way, is a crucial structural shift for NASA.
How so?
Well, in the past, the primary focus of mission control was almost purely operational.
Just keeping them alive.
Right, keeping the spacecraft functioning and the astronauts alive. But by integrating dedicated science officers directly into the real-time flight control team, they are ensuring that scientific observation isn't just an afterthought.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, so as the astronauts pass over uncharted lunar geology, these officers can seamlessly pivot operations to capture specific data on the fly.
That makes a lot of sense. But amidst all this high-minded majesty, there was an incident reported from the capsule that really grounded the whole endeavor for me. The astronauts reported a burning smell.
Yes, from the space toilet.
So the space toilet. I mean, try to put yourself in that capsule. You are on the ultimate historic road trip. You are breaking the distance records of the human species. You are looking at the far side of the moon, and suddenly the bathroom smells like an electrical fire.
Yeah, not ideal.
It is basically the equivalent of being trapped in a cramped minivan with your family on a summer road trip, except you are in a complete vacuum, you can't roll the windows down, and the nearest rest stop is 250,000 miles away.
Huh. It sounds like a punchline. But from an engineering standpoint, this is actually a massive critical hurdle.
Walk me through that. Like, why is a malfunctioning toilet an existential threat?
Because a spacecraft is a perfectly sealed, incredibly volatile environment.
Yeah.
If a waste management system fails, I mean, first of all, you have an immediate biological hazard for the crew.
Right, of course.
But more dangerously, these systems are electrically powered. If a motor burns out and sparks in an environment that is heavily regulated with oxygen, an electrical fire can consume the capsule in seconds.
Wow.
Yeah, you cannot simply evacuate. NASA's team on the ground had to immediately halt standard operations and troubleshoot this odor. It just proves that living in space is less about floating elegantly in zero gravity and entirely about the rigorous, unrelenting maintenance of your survival systems.
It is the ultimate basement generator keeping the skyscraper functioning.
Exactly.
But Artemis isn't the only thing happening in the cosmos right now. There is a massive, multifaceted push to unlock the solar system. For example, Firefly Aerospace's Blue Ghost lunar lander just touched down in a completely unexplored area of the moon.
Yeah, and the geological data they are sending back is already surprising scientists. It's exposing just how little we actually know about the composition of our closest celestial neighbor.
And this exploration is no longer just the domain of government science agencies, is it?
Not at all. We are witnessing a massive commercial land grab in space. United Launch Alliance just sent up an Atlas V rocket, and it carried their heaviest payload to date.
Wait, what was it?
29 massive satellites, specifically for Amazon's low Earth orbit internet project.
Right, Amazon's attempt to blanket the entire globe in high-speed internet access. Low Earth orbit, or WELO, is getting incredibly crowded.
Very crowded.
But even as we clutter up our immediate orbital neighborhood, we are peering deeper into the universe than ever before. The European Space Agency, their Gaia mission, just published findings identifying dozens of hidden star streams in the outer edges of the Milky Way.
This is where astrophysics gets truly fascinating. These star streams are essentially the cosmic skeletal remains of smaller, ancient galaxies that our Milky Way absorbed or, well, cannibalized over billions of years.
Cannibalized. That's intense.
Yeah. But the reason this matters isn't just galactic history. By mapping exactly how these star streams are moving and stretching, astrophysicists can map the gravitational pull acting upon them.
Okay.
And that allows them to shed light on dark matter, which is the invisible, unobservable scaffolding that holds the entire universe together.
That is genuinely mind-bending. And closer to home, the new Rubin Observatory just logged 11,000 new asteroids, taking measurements on tens of thousands more. Also, astronomers have now directly observed dying stars, specifically in their red giant phase, devouring giant planets. They literally watched a star expand and swallow a planetary body whole.
It is a violently beautiful universe out there.
It really is. Oh, and for the stargazers listening, mark your calendars, because Venus is going to be shining at its absolute brightest in the spring and summer of 2026.
That'll be amazing to see.
Totally. So there is immense beauty and scientific discovery happening every second. But with companies like Amazon launching incredibly heavy internet payloads to establish commercial dominance in orbit, are we treating space as a pristine scientific sanctuary or just the next frontier for commercial real estate development and, like, inevitable environmental degradation?
I mean, that is the dividing line in the modern space community right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, the commercialization of space, what Amazon and SpaceX are doing, is undeniably driving down the cost of access. It allows for rapid, iterative technological development the government agencies simply cannot match anymore. But there is a massive dark side. Low Earth orbit is becoming congested. We are dealing with unprecedented light pollution that is actually blinding terrestrial observatories.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about the light pollution from satellites.
It's a huge issue for astronomers. And most critically, we are courting the Kessler syndrome.
Okay, I have heard that term thrown around, but what exactly is the Kessler syndrome?
So to understand it, you have to understand orbital mechanics. Things in orbit aren't just floating, right? They are falling toward Earth while moving sideways so fast, around 17,000 miles per hour, that they just keep missing the ground.
Right, right.
At those speeds, a fleck of paint or a Luke bolt hits with the kinetic energy of a hand grenade.
A flick of paint.
Yes. So the Kessler syndrome is a theoretical scenario where orbit becomes so crowded that one collision shatters a satellite, creating a cloud of high-speed shrapnel.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And that shrapnel then hits other satellites, creating a chain reaction, a cascading dome of millions of pieces of lethal debris.
Like a snowball effect, but with metal at 17,000 miles an hour.
Exactly. And if that happens, it could completely lock humanity out of space for generations. No satellite internet, no GPS, no weather monitoring.
Wow.
We are projecting our earthly economic models, rapid expansion and consequence-free resource extraction directly into the cosmos.
Which perfectly illustrates the tension we talked about at the beginning of the show, because all of this ambition, this desire to conquer orbit and expand our technological capabilities, it has an immediate, massive cost right here on the ground.
Right.
We are pulling infinite data from the cosmos, but it requires incredibly heavy energy demands from the physical Earth.
Yeah, the hunger of the modern tech industry is no longer just for data.
Yeah.
It is an insatiable appetite for physical electricity.
Well, let's look at the sheer numbers.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence companies, and we were talking about the titans here, Meta, Microsoft, Google, they are currently pouring billions of dollars into building enormous natural gas power plants.
Yeah.
And they aren't building these to power cities. They are building them explicitly to power their AI data centers. To give you some context, in 2024, data centers accounted for about 4% of the total electricity use in the United States.
Which is already massive.
Exactly. And by 2030, that single sector is projected to double to 8%. Overall, the integration of AI into everything we do could lead to a 165% increase in total power demand.
And this completely upends global climate strategies.
How so?
Well, for the last decade, the global energy sector has relied on the concept of a bridge fuel. Natural gas emits less carbon than burning coal, so the plan was to use natural gas as a bridge to sustain the grid while we built out clean, renewable infrastructure like wind, solar, and geothermal.
Right. Use it until the green tech catches up. But the bridge seems to have become the final destination.
Precisely. AI's explosive exponential growth requires so much sustained baseline energy so quickly that these tech companies cannot afford to wait for renewable grids to mature.
Right, because solar and wind are intermittent.
Exactly. The sun goes down, the wind stops. But an AI server farm training a massive language model needs immense, uninterrupted power 24 hours a day. So they are reverting to natural gas just to keep the servers from shutting down, which threatens to derail international climate goals entirely.
And people are starting to notice the physical footprint of this digital revolution, too. Like, a recent poll released by the Pew Research Center had a fascinating finding. They asked communities what kind of development they would tolerate, and people overwhelmingly stated they would rather have a massive Amazon distribution warehouse built in their backyard than an AI data center.
Which tells you everything you need to know about how the public is calculating localized economics right now.
Yeah.
Historically, a massive logistical warehouse brings intense community pushback. You get hundreds of semi-trucks destroying local roads, noise pollution, smog.
Yeah.
But people tolerate it because warehouses are massive job creators. They employ hundreds or thousands of local residents. Data centers, though, are entirely different beasts.
Right. They are basically windowless fortresses.
Exactly. Once a data center is built and operational, it employs very few people. Mostly a handful of security guards and some specialized technicians. Yet it drains local municipal resources at a staggering rate.
Not just electricity either.
No, we aren't just talking about electricity. We are talking about millions of gallons of fresh water required daily just to run the cooling systems to keep the servers from melting. Communities are looking at these structures and realizing they are environmental drains that offer almost zero local economic benefit.
It is the ultimate physical manifestation of the cloud. Like, the cloud is actually just a million hot servers drinking the local water supply.
That's exactly what it is.
And the cooling issue is so severe that SpaceX has actually proposed a radical solution, which is orbital data centers, literally putting the server farms into space.
And from a purely physical standpoint, the logic makes sense.
Does it?
Well, yeah. Space is incredibly cold, which immediately solves the thermal management problem. And if you position the satellites correctly, you have unimpeded 247 access to solar energy without atmospheric interference.
Oh, I see.
But the logistics of launching heavy server racks into orbit maintaining them in a high radiation environment, and transmitting that massive volume of data back to Earth without latency issues, those are monumental engineering hurdles.
But the reason these tech companies are desperate enough to consider launching servers into space is because of what AI is actually accomplishing. The breakthroughs are undeniable, like Anthropic, which is one of the leading AI research companies, just acquired a stealth biotech startup called Coefficient Bio for $400 million.
Yeah.
And they are planning to use advanced language models not to rate emails, but to accelerate drug discovery, predicting clinical trial outcomes, and designing new molecular structures for medicines.
And that interdisciplinary application of technology is happening across the sciences right now. Look at what is happening in physics. Researchers at the University of California, Riverside recently achieved something remarkable. They used a technique called time-resolved spectroscopy to directly observe quasiparticles called polarons.
Okay, I read this article 3 times and my eyes completely glazed over.
Fair enough.
What is a polaron, and why are scientists so excited about observing one?
So it is a massive leap in condensed matter physics. To understand it, we look at the Furlick model. Essentially, a polaron forms when a charge carrier, like a single electron, moves through a solid material and its electrical charge physically disturbs the atomic lattice structure of that material.
Okay, I am going to try an analogy here to see if I grasp this.
Go for it.
Imagine a bowling ball rolling across a tight trampoline. As the heavy ball moves, it physically pulls the fabric of the trampoline down around it, creating a deep dip.
Right.
And that dip doesn't stay still, it moves with the ball as it rolls. So the ball and the dip in the fabric essentially become one single moving unit? Is that close?
That is actually an exceptionally accurate way to visualize it. The electron is the bowling ball, and the crystal atomic lattice of the material is the trampoline fabric. As the electron moves, its charge pulls the surrounding atoms out of their normal alignment. That structural deformation travels with the electron. Together, the electron and its surrounding atomic distortion are collectively referred to as the polaron.
Okay, but if I am listening to this on my drive to work, why do I care about an atomic bowling ball on a microscopic trampoline?
Because understanding exactly how polarons behave dictates our ability to control how electricity moves.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, if scientists can understand and manipulate polarons, it could revolutionize the entire global energy grid. Specifically, they're looking at a class of materials called halide perovskites, which are at the absolute cutting edge of solar cell research. Right now, when sunlight hits a solar panel and knocks an electron loose, that electron faces resistance. The polaron effect can either hinder or help that electron reach the wire to create usable current. If we master this, we are looking at hyper-efficient solar panels, batteries that hold vastly more charge, and incredibly advanced electronics. We are quite literally observing the atomic fabric of our future energy systems.
Man, it is breathtaking. We are mapping the atomic lattice of a universe. We are using AI to predict molecular medicine. But wait, this is where the grand illusion fractures for me.
Yeah.
We have all this high-end capability, yet we cannot seem to protect the basic foundational infrastructure of our society. Just this week, Italy's famous Uffizi Gallery suffered a severe cyber attack on its IT systems.
Yeah, I saw that.
Now, the physical Renaissance artworks are safe, but their entire digital framework and database were breached. And in Northern Ireland, the Education Authority had their school IT system crippled by a cyber attack right before the critical student exam season. Like, are we just building an incredibly advanced digital house of cards here?
It is the defining paradox of the 21st century. We have engineered systems of unimaginable complexity, but they are inherently fragile, precisely because they are perfectly interconnected. The attack on the Uffizi Gallery is a prime example.
Right.
We are digitizing our cultural heritage for global access and preservation, which is wonderful. But the moment a 500-year-old painting is tethered to a server, it becomes a target for a hacker halfway across the world.
And the Northern Ireland attack feels so much more visceral to me.
Because it shows the localized human trauma of digital fragility. You have thousands of high school students preparing for exams that will dictate their university access and future careers, and suddenly they're locked out of their study resources and schedules because a server went down.
That's awful.
A single compromised password can bring an entire regional infrastructure to its knees. We are sprinting toward an AI-driven future, but our digital security architecture is constantly, desperately struggling to patch the holes left behind.
And if you are listening to this on a smartphone right now, that device in your hand is the perfect nexus of exactly what we were talking about. It connects you to orbital satellites, it pulls data from AI servers running on natural gas, and it is vulnerable to a cyber attack at any moment.
It's a lot to hold in your hand.
It really is. But the fragility we are talking about isn't just digital. The massive energy demands we just discussed are bleeding directly into the physical changes happening to our planet.
And the data indicates those physical planetary changes are accelerating beyond historical models.
Let's look at the climate anomalies reported just this week. There is a massive, unprecedented Arctic thaw happening. This isn't just ice melting, it is thawing permafrost that has been frozen solid for thousands of years.
And the scale of that is terrifying.
It is. As it thaws, it is unleashing carbon into the atmosphere. Estimates suggest there are over 1,700 billion metric tons of carbon stored in that permafrost. And thousands of miles away, off the coast of Southern California, oceanographers are tracking record-high ocean temperatures, sparking fears of a prolonged marine heat wave. This physically alters the ocean chemistry, threatening local fisheries and causing massive toxic algal blooms.
And what scientists are paying close attention to right now is the uneven distribution of these temperature shifts.
Uneven how?
Well, a comprehensive study recently demonstrated that while the United States is warming overall, it is doing so in highly asymmetric ways. The western U.S. is experiencing significantly more extreme, prolonged heat episodes.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
But concurrently, the northern regions of the country are losing their historical cold extremes. The winters are milder. This isn't just a gentle warming, it is a violent destabilization of the historical weather patterns that our agricultural and infrastructure systems were actually built upon.
And that destabilization comes with an agonizing economic price tag. In 2023 alone, the U.S. saw a record 28 separate weather and climate disasters that each exceeded $1 billion in damages.
28 of them.
Yeah, 28. The total cost was at least $92.9 billion.
And that is just the financial metric. The physical reality of those disasters is playing out globally as we speak.
Exactly. Right now, Storm Dave is slamming the United Kingdom. Authorities have issued a severe amber alert for 80-mile-per-hour winds, accompanied by heavy snow that is just paralyzing travel across Scotland.
Right.
Halfway across the world, Southern California is battling intense, fast-moving brush fires. The Springs fire, which tore through Moreno Valley and Acton, is currently 75% contained, but it was driven by these fierce 50-mile-per-hour Santa Ana winds that make firefighting almost impossible.
It's a nightmare for the crews out there.
And tragically, in the geological realm, an earthquake struck the Hindu Kush region of Afghanistan, killing 8 members of a single family when their home collapsed.
When you lay all of these events out, the Arctic permafrost, the marine heat waves, the extreme storms, the fires, and the tectonic activity, it really illustrates the overwhelming physical force of a planetary system in flux. And humanity is forced into immediate reactive adaptation. And that adaptation isn't just physical survival. It reverberates instantly through the global economy.
Well, let's transition into that economic adaptation because the numbers are fascinating. On a macro level, the United States economy appears incredibly resilient right now. The latest reports show the U.S. added a robust 178,000 jobs in March.
Which is a solid number.
It is. That keeps the national unemployment rate at a steady 4.3%, which gives the Federal Reserve some breathing room. They aren't under immediate pressure to enact drastic interest rate cuts to save a flailing job market. But when you look beneath that macro-level stability, specific micro-industries are facing brutal, sudden extermination.
The microeconomy is highly vulnerable to sudden shifts in human behavior, particularly when driven by technological or medical advancements.
Case in point, a once booming, wildly popular national cookie chain just abruptly closed all of its stores and filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy.
Yeah, I used to go there.
Right. And market analysts are drawing a direct, undeniable line between this collapse and the sudden explosive rise of GLP-1 weight loss drugs. Currently, an estimated 10% of American adults have tried these medications.
10%. That's massive.
It is fundamentally altering how a massive portion of the population eats, completely evaporating the market for high-calorie, indulgent treats.
It is crucial to understand the distinction in these bankruptcy filings, too, to see the severity of the market shift.
What do you mean?
Well, Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which the cookie chain filed, is a restructuring. The company is essentially asking the courts for a pause to renegotiate debts, close unprofitable locations, and try to emerge as a smaller surviving entity.
Okay.
But the shift is hitting other sectors even harder. A 50-year-old pizza chain just filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy.
And Chapter 7 is the end of the line, right?
Yes. Chapter 7 is total liquidation, there is no restructuring, the ovens are sold, the doors are padlocked, and the corporate entity ceases to exist. And when you look at the GLP-1 phenomenon, you understand why. These drugs don't just reduce stomach capacity.
What else do they do?
They act on the neurological pathways that govern satiety and craving. They literally suppress the psychological desire for sugar and heavy carbohydrates.
So we aren't just talking about people choosing a salad over a cookie. We are talking about a medical alteration of consumer desire.
Exactly. When 10% of a massive consumer base suddenly chemically stops craving your core product, a business model built over half a century collapses in a matter of months.
That's wild.
It is a brutal, rapid economic adaptation cycle. And it isn't just food. In the health sector, over 3 million bottles of eye drops manufactured by KC. Pharmaceuticals were just recalled from major retailers like CVS and Walgreens due to severe safety and contamination concerns.
It seems like every system, from the climate to our internal biology to our supply chains, is under immense pressure right now.
If we synthesize this, we see a striking parallel. Just as the physical climate is shifting and forcing geographic communities to adapt to fires and floods, our internal biological environment is shifting due to medical breakthroughs like the GLP-1 drugs.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
The economy is not a static machine, it is a living ecosystem. And we have just introduced massive, simultaneous evolutionary pressure points on both the planetary scale and the biological scale.
An evolutionary pressure point. I love that framing, because it brings us to a crucial perspective shift. Humanity has always faced shifting climates, natural disasters, and evolutionary pressures. Sometimes, to understand the sheer panic of the modern day, we have to look back into the dirt and the water to see how our ancestors navigated these exact same existential threats.
Right. Archaeology is, at its core, the study of human resilience. It is the physical record of how we survived disaster.
And the technology we're using to look back is fundamentally changing our understanding of who we were. Let's look at Norway. Researchers there use LIDAR technology to survey Rocknehaugen.
Yes.
For those who don't know, LIDAR is essentially aerial laser scanning that penetrates thick vegetation and topsoil to map the ground beneath. Now, Rocknehaugen is the largest prehistoric mound in Norway, and for generations, anthropologists assumed it was a massive, labor-intensive burial tomb constructed for a powerful elite king or chieftain. But the LiDAR imaging revealed a completely different structure. It might not be a tomb at all. Evidence suggests it is a monument built collectively by a community in direct response to a catastrophic landslide that devastated the area.
And this discovery completely upends the traditional anthropological paradigm.
How so?
Modern society has a profound tendency to project our own hierarchical, top-down power structures onto ancient peoples. We look at a massive monument and immediately assume it represents a giant ego.
Yeah.
You know, a wealthy ruler forcing a peasant class to haul dirt to glorify his death.
Right, the pyramid model.
Exactly. But the data from Rocknehaugen suggests something far more cooperative and, honestly, moving. It paints a picture of a traumatized but resilient community coming together in the aftermath of a terrifying natural disaster.
Wow.
Yeah, they built a monument not to a king, but perhaps to their own survival, or to appease the volatile natural forces that nearly wiped them out. It is a story of communal trauma response, not autocratic power.
And ironically, the modern environmental crises we just discussed are actually helping us uncover these ancient stories. Because of severe droughts and receding water levels across the globe, archaeologists are finding things that have been hidden for millennia.
Yeah, it's a strange silver lining.
It is. Recently, receding waters and a drying lake bed revealed a stunning, perfectly preserved 11,000-year-old structure. It just slowly appeared out of the mud as the water vanished.
It is a bitter, profound irony. The acceleration of our modern climate crisis is actively uncovering the artifacts of ancient communities who themselves were likely driven to collapse or migration by historical environmental shifts.
And we are finding equally incredible time capsules beneath the ocean waves. The French Navy was conducting a routine sonar survey near Saint-Tropez and accidentally tracked an anomaly.
Just stumbled right onto it.
Yeah. They sent down equipment and discovered the deepest known shipwreck in French territorial waters. It is a vessel called the Camerotte 4. It is sitting at a crushing depth of 2,500 meters.
Wow, that is deep.
It sank roughly 500 years ago, and they found its cargo hold still perfectly stacked with Ligurian ceramic jugs. Meanwhile, in Turkey, researchers are using autonomous underwater drones to map the submerged ancient Roman city of Juliopoulos, which was a thriving, bustling trade hub before it was eventually swallowed by a modern dam reservoir.
The Cameron 4 is a fascinating case study in marine preservation, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, at 2,500 meters deep, the environment is pitch black, near freezing, and under immense hydrostatic pressure. Crucially, it is largely devoid of the specific wood-boring organisms and biological activity that typically degrade shipwrecks in shallower, warmer waters.
So it's basically in deep freeze.
Exactly. It is an untouched, perfect time capsule of 16th century Mediterranean logistics. It reminds us that global, interconnected trade networks, moving ceramics across perilous environments, existed half a millennium before Amazon launched a satellite.
But I want to go back even further than the Romans or the 16th century sailors. Let's go to the very beginning of the human story.
Okay.
Paleontologists believe they have definitively identified the very first human ancestor that adapted to walk upright. The species is called Sahelanthropus shadensis. The fossilized remains were discovered in Chad, a country in north-central Africa, and they date back a staggering 7 million years.
7 million is hard to even fathom.
It really is. Now, 7 million years ago, a small ape-like creature living in a changing landscape decides to stand up on two legs. How does that single, simple physical adaptation of walking upright set off a chain reaction that results in a species that is currently building natural gas plants to power artificial intelligence?
It is the defining evolutionary cascade of our existence. Bipedalism, the act of habitual walking on two legs, is the critical divergence point that separates the hominin lineage from the rest of the primates.
Right.
Why Sahelanthropus stood up is still debated. Perhaps to see predators over tall savanna grass as the African forests receded, or perhaps to carry food over longer distances. But the reason matters less than the physical result.
Which was?
Standing up permanently freed the hands from the burden of locomotion.
They no longer needed their knuckles to walk.
Precisely. Once the hands are free over millions of years of evolutionary pressure, they develop intricate dexterity. You evolve the precision grip, you can pick up a rock, assess its weight, and strike it against another rock to fashion a sharp edge.
And once you have a sharp edge, the entire game changes.
It changes your biological destiny. Tool use allows these early hominins to butcher animal carcasses and crack open bones to access marrow, which is incredibly dense in fat and calories.
And brains need calories?
Right. The human brain is a massive energy sink. It requires immense caloric intake to grow. Those extra, easily accessible calories fuel the evolutionary expansion of the cerebral cortex. A larger, more complex brain leads to abstract thought, the development of complex language, sophisticated social cooperation, and eventually, the cognitive ability to conceptualize mathematics, write code, and launch a rocket.
Wow.
But that entire journey, from the savannah to the stars, only happened because a creature 7 million years ago needed to free its hands to survive a changing climate.
It is genuinely mind-blowing to draw that straight, unbroken line. From a creature standing up in the grass in Chad to cooperate and survive, to a modern species that is currently entangled in incredibly complex, technologically lethal, and highly volatile geopolitical conflicts.
That's quite the arc.
It is. We have evolved from cooperating to survive nature to fighting each other over the resources required to run our technology. Which brings us to the final and heaviest part of our dive today, the global flashpoints, the highly contested, fragmented reality of the modern geopolitical landscape.
And this landscape requires incredibly careful, objective analysis because the situations are intensely complex, the stakes are existential, and the developments are unfolding by the hour.
Let's start with the most immediate military crisis, the escalation between the United States and Iran.
Yes.
During an ongoing, highly classified conflict officially designated Operation Epic Fury, a United States F-15E Strike Eagle fighter jet was shot down over Iranian territory.
This is a massive development.
Huge. Military reports indicate this specific jet was attached to the 494th Fighter Squadron operating out of RAF Lakenheath in the UK. Following the crash, the U.S. military launched a massive, incredibly daring search and rescue mission. We are talking about combat rescue helicopters flying deep into hostile territory, actively taking enemy ground fire during the extraction.
The bravery is just astounding.
Right. They managed to secure and rescue one of the crew members, but a frantic, desperate search is currently underway for the missing second airman.
The strategic implications of this event are staggering. From a purely military and technological perspective, the fact that an advanced, highly capable F-15E was shot down indicates that Iranian integrated air defense systems are far more sophisticated and lethal than previously acknowledged in public assessments.
That's a scary thought.
It is. But the human element, the missing airman, creates a geopolitical crisis of the highest order. If that airman is captured alive by Iranian forces, it immediately evokes the deep political trauma of the 1979 hostage crisis. A captured American service member provides Iran with immense, almost untouchable leverage in any diplomatic or military negotiation.
And the conflict is already expanding beyond the airspace. Iran has launched retaliatory strikes targeting energy infrastructure in neighboring Kuwait. Specifically, they hit the Mina al-Amadi oil refinery and the headquarters of the Kuwait Petroleum Corporation. But the move that has the entire globe panicked is that Iran has officially moved to close the Strait of Hormuz. For listeners who might not be familiar with the geography, the Strait of Hormuz is a narrow stretch of water between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. Why is the closure of this specific waterway causing global markets to melt down?
Because the Strait of Hormuz is essentially the absolute jugular vein of the global energy market.
The jugular vein.
Yes. At its narrowest point, it is only about 21 miles wide, but a massive percentage of the world's total seaborne traded oil, millions of barrels a day, must pass through that specific choke point to reach international markets.
That is a bottleneck.
A critical bottleneck. By mining or blockading that strait, Iran is not just engaging in a bilateral military conflict with the United States, they are effectively holding the entire global economy hostage.
And the response from the United States has been aggressive and highly public. U.S. President Donald Trump issued a strict 48-hour ultimatum for Iran to reopen the strait, and he bypassed traditional diplomatic channels to do it.
Right, on social media.
Exactly. He posted a message on the Truth Social platform, which included an uncensored F-bomb, which mainstream networks like CNN broadcasted live, threatening to blow everything up and actively target Iranian civilian infrastructure if the blockade isn't lifted.
It's an unprecedented level of direct public threat.
Meanwhile, international diplomatic efforts to de-escalate are flailing. Pakistan attempted to step in and broker a back-channel peace deal between Washington and Tehran, but that effort has completely collapsed. However, in a very strange twist, South African commercial vessels have managed to secure safe passage through the closed strait.
Yeah, that caught a lot of people off guard.
The South African Foreign Ministry apparently negotiated directly with Iran, which has caused massive friction and raised eyebrows across Western capitals.
The South African development is a perfect real-time example of how global alliances are fundamentally shifting right now.
Shifting away from the U.S.
Well, during the Cold War, or even the post-9/11 era, nations generally fell in line behind major superpowers during a crisis. But today, we are seeing a multipolar world. South Africa is prioritizing its own immediate energy security and utilizing its independent diplomatic ties with Iran, completely bypassing Western sanctions and ignoring the broader U.S.-Israeli conflict paradigm.
They're just looking out for themselves.
Exactly. It demonstrates that mid-level global powers are no longer willing to suffer economic collapse for the sake of Western geopolitical strategies.
And the economic suffering is immediate. Because of the spike in global oil prices caused by the Strait's closure, the aviation industry is bleeding money on jet fuel. United Airlines just announced an emergency measure, raising checked bag fees to $50 purely to offset the surging fuel costs.
It really hits home quickly.
It's a direct line from a military blockade in the Middle East to a family paying more to fly to Florida for a vacation. Everything is physically connected. But it's not just South Africa shifting its stance. We are seeing major realignments among the superpowers.
Right.
Russia and Egypt just held a high-level summit in Moscow to reaffirm a strategic partnership. They announced plans to build a massive joint logistics hub in Egypt, specifically to facilitate the flow of Russian oil and grain into Africa and the Middle East.
Wow.
Furthermore, a Kremlin envoy gave a press conference openly mocking the West, claiming the European Union is 15 years too late to prepare for this kind of energy shock, and pointedly noted that China is the nation quietly benefiting the most from Western distraction and the energy crisis.
It is a deliberate strategic capitalization on chaos. Russia is leveraging the Middle East conflict to solidify its influence in Africa via Egypt while highlighting the vulnerability of the European grid.
And the alliances are creating massive ethical and historical controversies. For example, the German automaker Volkswagen recently announced they are converting a manufacturing factory in Osnabrück. They aren't building cars, they are converting the line to produce critical components for the Iron Dome missiles defense system, working in direct partnership with Israel's Rafale advanced defense systems.
The Volkswagen news is highly contentious.
I can imagine.
Given Germany's dark 20th century history and the intense polarized global debate surrounding the current humanitarian situation in the Middle East, a historic German industrial giant producing military hardware for Israel sparks immense public outcry. It highlights how deeply and uncomfortably intertwined private, consumer industry, and military defense are becoming as the global security architecture deteriorates.
Which brings this massive global crisis right back to the shores of the United States, because the international conflict is fundamentally reshaping the American domestic budget.
It always comes back to the budget.
Always. In response to these escalating threats, President Trump is submitting a request for a massive, historically unprecedented $1.5 trillion defense budget for the year 2027. That represents a 44% increase in military spending.
44%, that's a staggering jump.
The administration states this funding is necessary to build what they are calling the Golden Fleet of advanced naval assets and to rapidly expand domestic missile defense shields. But to balance the ledger and pay for this military expansion, the president is proposing a sweeping 10% cut to domestic social programs.
Right.
Furthermore, he is proposing a devastating 47% cut to NASA's science funding, which directly impacts the exploratory missions we discussed in our first segment. He is also targeting a $1 billion reduction in the National Park Service budget, coupled with executive orders to open up previously protected federal wilderness areas to aggressive oil and gas drilling in the name of total energy independence.
This specific budget proposal represents a fundamental philosophical clash over the very definition of national security. And it is crucial to analyze the core philosophies driving both sides of this intense civil debate, rather than just looking at the partisan vitriol.
Let's break those philosophies down then.
Okay, so from a right-leaning conservative perspective, the argument is rooted in the harsh realities of hard power. Proponents of this budget look at the world we just described, Iran shooting down advanced fighters, Russia expanding logistics into Africa, China rising economically, and they conclude that we are facing unprecedented existential global threats.
Right, let's say a world on fire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Their philosophy dictates that without undeniable military supremacy and absolute unapologetic energy independence through domestic drilling, the nation will be held hostage by foreign powers. The conservative argument is that you simply cannot fund environmental protection or social welfare programs if the nation itself is not secure from external collapse. Military might and resource independence are viewed as the absolute prerequisites for national survival.
I understand that logic. It's about surviving in a hostile world. But on the other hand, the left-leaning progressive perspective views this budget as incredibly dangerous and fundamentally short-sighted.
Yes, very much so.
The progressive philosophy argues that true national security is not just about stockpiling weapons. It is about the holistic health and stability of the society you are supposedly defending. They argue that slashing scientific research, defunding environmental protections while the Arctic thaws, and gutting social safety nets sacrifices the nation's long-term future.
Right. Internal rot versus external threats.
Exactly. Their argument is that a society with a collapsed environment, a struggling middle class, and a defunded scientific community will eventually crumble from within, regardless of how large its naval fleet is. They believe true security requires leading the world in innovation and maintaining domestic harmony, not just projecting military force.
Exactly. It is a profound debate over whether security is achieved through external armor or internal fortitude. And what is fascinating right now is that the political fracture isn't just between the right and the left. There are massive public schisms happening within the parties themselves.
Yes, the internal democratic debate is exploding right now. Rahm Emanuel, who is a top-tier Democratic operative and the former chief of staff to President Obama, recently gave a highly publicized interview on the Fifth Column podcast.
I listened to that. It was intense.
It was. And he relentlessly criticized his own party. He explicitly claimed that modern liberals have lost the plot. He argued that the progressive wing has prioritized niche, woke cultural issues and academic debates over the core, tangible economic concerns of the working and middle class. He stated flatly that this cultural prioritization is actively driving working-class voters away from the Democratic Party.
Emmanuel's comments are sending shockwaves because they represent a growing, vocal faction of centrist Democrats who are terrified of the current political trajectory.
They want to pivot.
Exactly. They are pushing for an immediate aggressive return to bread-and-butter economic messaging, jobs, infrastructure, healthcare, fearing that highly polarized cultural debates are alienating the broader, moderate electorate necessary to win national elections.
And while the parties debate their messaging, the actual physical mechanics of how the electorate will vote are currently under fierce legal attack. As we speak, a coalition of 24 Democrat-led states are suing the Trump administration in federal court.
Right. Over the ballots.
Yes. They are challenging recent executive orders designed to severely limit the use of mail-in ballots. The administration and right-leaning election officials argue these limitations are absolutely essential, citing severe concerns over voter fraud and the paramount need to maintain strict election integrity in a polarized climate.
And the counter-argument.
Conversely, the Democrat-led states argue these limits have nothing to do with fraud, but are a blatant, calculated attempt at voter disenfranchisement, explicitly aimed at suppressing turnout in urban and minority demographics that rely heavily on early and mail-in voting.
It is a profound structural stress test of the American democratic system. And it is happening simultaneously with a global energy crisis, a massive technological revolution in AI, and an escalating military conflict in the Middle East. The pressure on the civic architecture is immense.
It really is. Okay, let's take a collective breath and zoom out. We have covered an unbelievable, almost overwhelming amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started by looking at the sheer fragility of Earth from the window of the Artemis capsule halfway to the moon. We dove into the subbasement to see how our insatiable hunger for artificial intelligence is completely rewiring our global energy grids, forcing us to burn natural gas just to keep up with the data.
Yeah.
We looked back at the dirt to see the ancient catastrophes and evolutionary pressures that forced our early ancestors to stand up and adapt. And finally, we confronted the incredibly tense, fragmented geopolitical conflicts over oil routes, defense budgets, and core societal values happening right now.
And if you are listening to this, driving in your car or walking your dog, I want to remind you of something critical. The news cycle is designed to feel overwhelmingly chaotic, to make you feel powerless.
It definitely works sometimes.
It does. But understanding these connections is your defense against that chaos. Recognizing how a military blockade in the Strait of Hormuz directly results in the airline charging you more for your baggage, or understanding how an AI observing atomic polarons today might revolutionize the solar panels on your roof tomorrow. These connections give you a map. They help you navigate the complexities of the modern world without feeling lost in the relentless noise.
I love that. A map for the modern world. That is exactly why we do this. I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today. 7 million years ago, a small creature we call Sahelanthropus stood up on 2 legs in the tall grass of Africa. It stood up to free its hands, to see further across the horizon, to cooperate, and to survive a rapidly changing environment. Today, we are building massive artificial intelligence networks to see further into our data, and we are engineering massive rockets to see further into the absolute depths of space. But as we look at the bitter conflicts, the deep political divides, and the struggles down here in the dirt of Earth, you really have to wonder, have we actually learned how to walk together yet, or are we just standing taller while fighting over the exact same patch of dirt?
A profound and necessary question to end on.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. Keep looking up, but don't forget to check the basement. We will see you next time on The Deep Dive.
You're enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
Welcome to the debate. Right now, nearly 20% of the world's oil is trapped behind a geographical bottleneck so narrow that you can almost see across it.
And the traditional global police force, the U.S. Navy, is, well, suddenly unable to open the gates.
Yeah, it's a massive disruption.
Exactly.
Today we are examining the global shockwaves radiating from the escalating U.S.-Iran conflict, which is currently designated Operation Epic Fury. And we are seeing intense, immediate disruption on a planetary scale. I mean, a U.S. F-15E fighter jet has been shot down.
Right.
U.S.-Israeli strikes have resulted in the death of an Iranian Revolutionary Guard's intelligence chief. Iran has retaliated by striking Kuwait's Mina al-Ahmadi oil refinery. And, most consequentially for the planet, the strategic Strait of Hormuz is completely closed to Western vessels.
It is. And, while the daily headlines are obsessing over the kinetic military actions, the strikes, and the casualties, I think the real story is what this means for the global economic and security architecture. People see the Strait of Hormuz closing and they think, oh, it's a temporary supply chain glitch. But I actually view it as the catalyst for a massive, unprecedented consolidation of Western military and industrial power. We are witnessing the birth of a modern war economy that will ultimately reinforce the West's structural dominance over global markets and technology for the next century.
See, I completely disagree with that framing. I see this closure and the ensuing energy crisis as really the fatal heart attack of the post-Western order.
The fatal heart attack?
Yeah, absolutely. We are watching nations across the global South and East countries that, traditionally relied heavily on the American security umbrella successfully bypass Western institutions out of sheer survival. They are securing their own energy and diplomatic stability, and frankly, proving that the geopolitical center of gravity is moving permanently away from Washington and European capitals.
Well, and just briefly for our listeners, our analysis today draws on real-time reporting from outlets like the South China Morning Post, RT, France 24, Bloomberg, and the BBC.
Right. Well, let's start right there with this idea of the global South moving away from the West, because I think the reality of the energy crisis tells the exact opposite story.
How so? When we talk about the economic devastation of this war, we aren't just talking about, U.S. gasoline hitting $4 a gallon. For anyone listening wondering why a conflict in the Middle East matters to the broader planetary economy, you have to think about the price of basic staples at a local grocery store in the developing world.
Right, the ripple effects.
Exactly. In Pakistan, fuel prices have surged over 50%. An African Union and World Bank report is warning of skyrocketing food costs across the entire African continent because transport has just become unsustainably expensive. Sri Lanka is literally struggling to avert total economic collapse right now.
Yeah, but that is exactly why the shift is happening. The foundational promise of the post-World War II American order was that the U.S. would keep the global sea lanes open for free trade, right?
Sure.
They are failing to deliver that core service right now. So nations are forced to forge independent ties. I mean, look at South Africa.
Okay, but...
No, wait, think about it. They aren't making a political statement. They are just trying to keep their power grid online. They have actively negotiated direct passage through the Strait of Hormuz with Iran to safeguard their energy security. They are completely bypassing the Western sanctions regime.
But the Global South's attempt at independence is exactly what is proving their ultimate dependence. I mean, you only realize how vital the grid is when you try to unplug from it.
I'm not sure I follow.
The extreme vulnerability of countries like Pakistan and Sri Lanka demonstrates precisely why they cannot decouple from the U.S. police maritime order. When the U.S. system is stressed, the Global South's economy shatters. That isn't independence. That is profound structural dependence.
I hear you, but they are building the alternatives as we speak. This isn't just about, routing a few cargo ships differently. We are seeing BRICS nations increasingly trading in local currencies to avoid the weaponization of the U.S. dollar.
Well, currency is one thing, but
it's huge. Instead of routing a payment for oil through the U.S.-controlled SWIFT system, which essentially acts as the global financial switchboard, requiring currency to be converted to dollars and giving Washington veto power, countries like India and Russia are setting up direct exchange windows at their central banks.
Right.
It effectively makes Western financial sanctions invisible. And furthermore, Russia and Egypt have just solidified a strategic logistics hub for Arab and African states to facilitate independent movement of oil and grain.
Okay, setting up a local currency exchange window at a central bank is, a neat financial trick. But it completely ignores the physical reality of global trade. Seeking a new vendor assumes the new vendor has the capacity to deliver the inventory.
They are building that capacity.
But they don't have it now. China and Russia do not have the blue water naval capacity to police global trade routes. They can mediate treaties, sure. They can set up logistics hubs in Egypt, fine. But they cannot project power to secure the physical movement of goods across contested oceans. If a cargo ship is attacked, a local currency agreement isn't going to save it.
Well, if the West is so essential to securing that physical movement, why did Pakistan's bid to broker U.S.-Iran peace collapse prompting global economists to state that only India, China, and Russia can actually stop this war.
Because mediation is different from security.
But the U.S. is failing to provide the security it advertises, so the global South is turning to Beijing and Moscow. Even countries in Latin America, who traditionally rely heavily on U.S. economic cycles, are recognizing that commodity shocks from the Middle East require them to diversify their export markets toward Asia. They are realizing the West is a liability, not a shield.
I wouldn't call the West a liability when we are seeing the most massive retooling of industrial capital in modern history.
You mean the defense spending?
Yes. The argument that the West is losing its grip ignores the sheer scale of the war economy being spun up right now. We are looking at a proposed $1.5 trillion U.S. defense budget. That is a 40% increase.
Which is staggering.
It is, and this isn't just buying more of the same missiles. It is a structural realignment of the American economy. It funds initiatives like the Golden Fleet, which for our listeners is a total naval modernization integrating autonomous surface vessels, next-generation missile defense, and a massive revitalization of American shipbuilding infrastructure.
You're pointing to a $1.5 trillion defense budget as a sign of strength. But history tells a much darker story about dumping national wealth into a war machine.
It's not just the U.S., though. France is pushing a legislative framework to shift entirely to a war economy, dedicating over 76 billion euros by 2030 to quadruple kamikaze drone production. Capital is acting very rationally here.
Rationally?
Yes. Beneath the volatility of surging oil prices and, dropping stock futures amid President Trump's threats to destroy Iranian infrastructure, Western capital is consolidating its manufacturing might to secure defense interests.
Okay, let's dig into that consolidation, because the reporting highlights something really striking. Volkswagen is now collaborating with the Israeli arms manufacturer Rafael to build Iron Dome components in a factory in Germany.
Exactly. And from an economic perspective, that proves that Western industrial giants are highly adaptable.
Wait, Volkswagen? The consumer car company pivoting to missile defense?
Yes.
I don't see that as an indicator of industrial agility at all. I see that as a glaring red flag of economic desperation.
How so?
Why is Volkswagen really pivoting? The financial data shows it is driven by declining consumer profits, a severe technological lag in the electric vehicle market, and crippling energy costs in Germany. They can't compete in the global consumer market anymore, particularly against China, so they are retreating into the safety of state-funded defense contracting.
But state-funded defense contracting is precisely what built the aerospace and tech sectors in the United States during the Cold War. It's a proven engine for innovation.
But it looks a lot like the late-stage Soviet Union to me.
Oh, come on, the Soviet Union.
No, hear me out. The Soviets had incredible military technology. They built titanium submarines and world-class aerospace defense systems, right? But their domestic economy was entirely hollowed out to fund it. You effectively prioritize military-industrial output to the detriment of domestic economic vitality, leaving citizens to wait in line for basic goods.
That's a bit of a stretch.
Is it? We are seeing shades of that now. The U.S. is proposing a massive defense budget increase while simultaneously proposing a 10% cut to domestic programs, agriculture, health, environmental protection. That is the literal definition of hollowing out a nation's middle class to fund overseas conflicts.
The Soviet analogy falls flat because the Western economic engine is fundamentally capitalist and dynamic. That $1.5 trillion isn't disappearing into a bureaucratic black hole. It is being injected directly into high-tech manufacturing, advanced logistics, and artificial intelligence within the domestic economy. The technological leaps that come from a war economy always bleed into the civilian sector. It creates an economic moat that developing nations simply cannot cross without Western partnership.
Well, while the West is busy building that moat with artillery shells and defense contracts, look at who is actually capitalizing on the crisis. China is maintaining steady luxury spending, which is single-handedly boosting global sales right now.
Luxury spending isn't global security.
No, but this is. They are advancing their Zhuri initiative. For those unfamiliar, this is a dual-use space solar power plant design. It literally collects solar energy in orbit and beams it down to Earth.
Right, the orbital power station.
Yeah. This has massive civilian implications for clean, limitless energy,
but it also carries profound military capabilities for communication and electronic warfare. China is investing in the infrastructure of the future, while the West drains its coffers into regional terrestrial conflicts.
Okay, but the U.S. is equally focused on orbital infrastructure and space dominance, but that massive economic investment we're talking about doesn't exist in a vacuum. To protect those new supply chains and advanced technologies, you need physical operational security, and that brings us to the actual military and diplomatic reality on the ground.
Which is rapidly deteriorating.
Well, all this talk of the Global South pivoting relies on the assumption that the West is becoming isolated and fractured.
Which the diplomatic data strongly suggests it is. The U.S. is burning its soft power at an unprecedented rate. I mean, we have a 48-hour ultimatum issued to Tehran. We have high-profile targeted killings like the Revolutionary Guard's intel chief.
Yeah.
Former U.S. advisors are explicitly stating in the press that these threats guarantee no diplomatic deal can ever be reached. The U.S. is isolating itself from the international community.
Diplomacy often requires the credible threat of overwhelming force to be effective, though.
But contrast the U.S. approach with what the rest of the watching world, Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, is seeing at the United Nations.
Okay.
You have China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi explicitly stating readiness to cooperate with Russia to ease Middle East tensions. They are utilizing the UN Security Council platform to project themselves as the rational adult in the room. They are offering mediation. They are offering infrastructure development. They are offering stability. The U.S. is offering ultimatums and airstrikes. If you are a developing nation deciding who to align with for your economic future, the choice is becoming very clear.
I think you are mistaking diplomatic friction for systemic isolation. It is easy for China to play the peacemaker at the UN when they aren't bearing the burden of global security.
But they are offering an alternative.
Let's look at what actually happens when the chips are down, all right? The military cohesion of the West is profound, and it is operational right now. When that American F-15E was shot down over Iranian territory, what happened? The U.S. didn't retreat. They executed a highly complex, high-stakes rescue operation deep inside hostile territory to recover their pilot.
An operation that resulted in the loss of a Night Stalker AH-6 Little Bird helicopter, leaving burning American wreckage on a forward landing site inside Iran.
Yes, in high-intensity combat, assets are lost. But the objective was achieved. One airman was rescued, and the search for the second continues. But I want to focus on the subtext of that operation because it's crucial to our debate about Western consolidation.
Okay.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu strongly hinted that Israel assisted with that rescue. What that reveals is a seamlessly integrated intelligence and military apparatus between the U.S. and its regional allies. It involves satellite intelligence, allied airspace clearance, and elite special operations behind enemy lines.
Right.
It demonstrates an unmatched level of allied military cohesion and force projection. A nascent China-Russia bloc simply cannot replicate that. If a Chinese national is taken hostage in a conflict zone, Beijing does not have the expeditionary capability to go in and get them out. The West does.
Having the ability to project force into a conflict zone doesn't mean much if your policies are what created the conflict zone in the first place, does it?
That's a different debate.
Not really. You're arguing that the West is strong because it has the best firefighters, but the rest of the world is noticing that the West keeps starting the fires. When Iran strikes Kuwait's Mina al-Ahmadi oil refinery, the ripple effects hit global trade instantly.
True.
The disruption of the global supply chain is what the rest of the world cares about. They don't care about the tactical success of a helicopter rescue. They care that the conflict is shutting down 20% of the world's energy supply.
But the tactical success of that rescue and the overarching military dominance it represents is exactly what ultimately secures those global supply chains. You mentioned the Strait of Hormuz being closed.
Yeah.
Let's be very clear about the geopolitical reality here. The only entity on Earth capable of forcibly reopening that strait and guaranteeing safe passage for global shipping is the United States Navy, backed by the very defense budget you criticized earlier.
Assuming they actually do it.
The Global South knows this. They may complain about U.S. policy at the UN, but they rely on U.S. hard power. When a French-owned commercial ship successfully navigated the strait recently, it wasn't because of Chinese diplomacy or a UN resolution.
It was because of the implicit threat of Western military retaliation if that ship was touched.
I think that fundamentally misreads the current global sentiment. The Global South isn't just complaining at the UN, they're actively building the workarounds. And this conflict is accelerating it because it proves that relying on the US-led system carries an unacceptable level of risk.
Risk is everywhere, though.
Sure, but if the US can be dragged into a massive regional war that spikes inflation globally, why would a developing nation tie its economic future to that system? The alternative system might be in its infancy, but the motivation to mature it has never been higher.
They might have the motivation, yes. But the West is using this crisis to ensure that alternative system never achieves parity. The massive influx of capital into Western defense budgets revitalizes the entire tech sector. It forces European economies to align their industrial output with American security goals.
At a steep cost.
When the dust settles on this crisis, the West will have a modernized, battle-tested military-industrial complex, and the rest of the world will still need access to Western markets to survive.
But that strength abroad is coming at the cost of domestic stability. We have states suing the Trump administration over voting rights, we have soaring inflation affecting the working class, and we have corporate bankruptcies rising as consumer spending shifts due to energy costs. You cannot project strength abroad while your domestic foundation is crumbling under the weight of an expensive war economy.
Well, I disagree that the foundation is crumbling. The recent March jobs report showed the U.S. economy adding 178,000 jobs, which exceeded expectations. The labor market remains incredibly resilient. The West is taking an economic hit from this crisis, yes, but it has the structural shock absorbers to handle it. A country like Sri Lanka does not. That asymmetry in economic resilience is exactly what will maintain Western hegemony.
This has been a deeply complex exchange, and it brings us to what we must ultimately take away from this crisis.
Absolutely.
When I look at the totality of the evidence from the devastating energy inflation in vulnerable nations to the independent diplomatic maneuvers of South Africa, Egypt, China, and Russia, the picture is clear to me. A unipolar, Western-led financial and diplomatic system is fracturing. The rest of the planet is realizing that the old system is simply too volatile, too prone to militarization to serve the economic needs of the global majority.
And when I look at the same data, I see a geopolitical map under immense stress, sure, but the surface cracks do not indicate a foundational collapse. The massive reallocation of capital into Western defense budgets, the industrial pivoting of major European economies to a war footing, and the unmatched operational integration of allied militaries all reaffirm the enduring structural dominance of the West.
Right.
The war economy we are seeing emerge is a feature of resilience, ensuring that the West will dictate the terms of whatever global order comes next.
Well, the immense value of observing these real-time, planetary shifts in power dynamics cannot be overstated. The ultimate economic and diplomatic fallout of Operation Epic Fury is still actively writing itself across global markets, and the stakes could not be higher.
Absolutely. The data points are coming in every single day, and we suggest our listeners continue exploring the multifaceted reporting on these issues.
We will leave you to form your own conclusion, but the next time you see the cost of a basic commodity spike or read about a new defense contract, ask yourself, are we watching a system fortifying itself for the next century, or are we watching the final, expensive gasps of an era coming to an end? Thank you for listening to the debate.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.